Small businesses are often the backdrop of very special memories. I spent like my whole 20s hanging out at the Raven on Mount Pleasant Street. And I still go back there kind of when my roommate from those years comes back to town. And that's probably about it. And what we talk about is all the stuff we did there. Most people don't have an outlet to share these kinds of stories, as sweet as they are, but the folks at District Bridges want to change that. Their new Love Your Neighborhood campaign features stories of love and connection from the 7 neighborhoods they work in, and there's also special limited edition swag like bucket hats, t-shirts, and stickers that you could buy to rep your neighborhood. Show your neighborhood spirit and spread some love this summer. Visit districtbridges.org/loveyourneighborhood to share your special memory today. Once again, that's districtbridges.org/loveyourneighborhood. Today on CityCast DC, DC has surprised itself by building a lot of housing. Washington Post reporter Megan Flynn is here to tell us about it. Plus, CityCast's Priyanka Tilve and I will talk about the Amtrak takeover of Union Station and a lawsuit that might, maybe, speed up train service. And we've got City Paper's Best of DC. Today is Friday, August 2nd. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Megan.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Hey, Priyanka.
Hello. Good to be here.
Good to see you, too. So, Megan, the knock on blue cosmopolitan coastal cities like Washington is they can't build anything. And it's very expensive and time-consuming to build housing. It's one of the reasons housing is so expensive in places like this. We get outstripped by sort of cities and not on the coasts who can build things much faster. DC, though, set itself this goal 5 years ago of building 36,000 units, and they say they've done it.
Ahead of schedule. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, this was really in response to a housing shortage that really became clear in the mid to late 2010s after DC just had this enormous population boom, more than 100,000 residents over the course of 10, 15 years that really put in perspective, what we need. We need more housing. We need more affordable housing. You had displacement at the same time that you had this population boom. So it's who's the housing going to be for? The 36,000 unit goal was something that Bowser set in 2019 to try to respond to that. It was really a region-wide problem. And so there's, other jurisdictions have housing goals by 2030 as well. But not many were actually on track. We looked at this last year and found just several really, including DC, which was actually, we found actually ahead of schedule in its own housing goals. We're really hitting the mark. And so, we were building housing probably over the last 5 to 7 years, about twice the rate, almost 3 times the rate from, the 2000s, the early 2010s. And so it really puts into perspective just how rapidly this housing construction boom has been going to put us in position to build 36,000 more units of housing. However, we've not met yet the affordable housing goal that was part of that, which is to have 12,000 units by 2025. So that's really still in progress.
Do you know how many we've built at this point?
In the affordable, they have a handy little tracker, 9,845 out of 12,000.
Okay. So they have to build a little more than 2,000 in the next few months.
Yeah, they're about 82% there. There's projects in the pipeline, so they say that they plan to make it happen by next year.
I'm really geeky for this stuff, so I'm curious, what changed? I mean, materials haven't gotten any cheaper, labor hasn't gotten any cheaper, neighborhood opposition hasn't gotten any less annoying if you're a developer. So what'd they do?
Yeah, this is a great question and was definitely my first question as well. There's a few things that are just a natural part of the market, right? You have a huge population boom. There's going to be a natural economic response, basic supply and demand. Demand's really high. You're going to see a lot of development opportunity. So some of this is not necessarily the city did something, but it was a market response. That's probably owing to some of the earlier 2019, 2020, 2021 projects that had been in the pipeline. However, DC is also zoned for a lot of multifamily housing. That's what makes it a lot easier to build in DC than, for example, some of the other jurisdictions that may be behind their goals, where there's a lot more single family housing. But the other thing on the affordable housing end is we have the Housing Production Trust Fund, which the city has poured more than $1 billion into during Mayor Bowser's tenure. It has struggled with building housing in like the lowest income brackets, which is really where some of our most challenging housing insecurity problems are. But it has done a lot for, those living below 80% of the median income, 60%, 50%. And that's really been a huge affordable housing tool to build the affordable housing that we have that many other jurisdictions just don't have, at least not to that degree.
Quick, can you explain that fund a little bit? Like if I'm a construction company, right? And I need to make money to pay my employees and so on. What does this public fund do? Do they subsidize me so that so it doesn't cost as much?
Yes, they subsidize the developers. So if you think about it, developers, and that's why you see a lot of these like luxury apartment buildings, is because the higher the rent, then the bigger return on your investment to build these buildings. But if you're making them, affordable to people, you're not going to get as big of a return on your investment. And so it makes the project basically less financially feasible, or you have less incentive to want to build this housing as a developer because it may not turn a profit if the rent is set in such a way that you're not going to make up whatever the full project cost was. So the Housing Production Trust Fund is kind of this gap financing that tries to solve that problem through subsidies. There's, it's one tool in the toolbox. There's lots of other, low-income housing tax credit funds, federal and local, that can be used. But really, the Housing Production Trust Fund is seen as like a huge, like many, many, many affordable housing projects rely on it. It's kind of a signal, DC is open for that kind of business, and it attracts interest from developers to want to do it.
So where is all of this housing? Like when I think about new places in the city, I'm imagining the Wharf, I guess, maybe Navy Yard. Is that where all of these 36,000 units are?
It is totally not your imagination. That is definitely where they are, okay. Actually. So they have a little map that shows where the biggest or the most of the housing has been built. The most total units, like not thinking about affordable projects, just any housing, is in that Navy Yard, waterfront area, where you really can just, with your own eyes, just see the change that this area has gone through, over the past decade, with so many more of these, like, fancy buildings, all these amenities. That is a huge concentration. Another big concentration is in the central Washington planning area. So, like kind of northwest, some downtown, that area that the city really has been trying to attract more housing and more residents. So that's, I would say, housing overall, that's where a lot of the buildings have been built. Affordable housing, if you then just focus on, okay, where are we seeing the most new affordable housing? It's mostly far southeast and southwest, a lot in Ward 8. And they have specific planning goals for each. It's divided into planning area. And areas including far southeast are just like way ahead of their own planning area goals. The city will say that's owing in part to the fact that a lot of the city's affordable housing already existed there. And a lot of the projects are basically like wholesale renovating some really dilapidated and rundown buildings that people have been living in, just in like terrible conditions that, violate all sorts of housing codes, and bringing in developers to, renovate them, make them livable and attractive to people to want to live in. And so a lot of those buildings are in some of these neighborhoods in Southeast where we're seeing the most progress in the housing goal. But part of that and why they set these goals by planning area is because, we don't want to just concentrate all of it in one area. We want it across the city. And there are just some areas that are really behind their goals that probably are not that surprising to people. Rock Creek West has only hit 11% of its target. Capitol Hill, 33% of its target. Near Northwest, 26%. So there are some areas that are struggling to meet their own affordable housing targets. And the city has said this past week that they're going to when they're looking at project, like developers coming to them with project applications for some of the affordable housing funds, that they're going to prioritize projects in the areas that are really behind in their goals.
Yeah, I know that like concentration of affordable housing in Southeast has been really controversial. And like the fact that there isn't enough in Ward 3, like upper Northwest area.
So let me ask you a sort of related question. What are they building? You know, like, because the knock on DC, and I guess on a lot of cities like DC, is insofar as there's been new construction, it tends to be 1 and 2 bedroom condos and apartments with like a cute roof deck and fire pit up there. Basically stuff that's either for childless people or empty nesters. But once you have kids and you are looking to stay in DC, you're suddenly in a place where there's just not a lot available. And as a result, the prices are things that are hard to afford, unlike a Washington Post reporter's salary, let alone someone working an hourly retail job. Have they built family style housing?
There is definitely still a shortage, I think, of the 3, 4, even 5 bedroom types of housing, like rental housing, you know, that you can just, if you're looking for a 1 bedroom or a 2 bedroom, you have no problem. Those definitely, I think, are lower on the supply end. And the reason is because it's like more expensive to build, or it's just easier to build the 1 to 2 bedroom units. So I think there has been like an acknowledgement of that is a form of housing that we are short on, and has been, it seems to be part of the awareness of like, well, what are we looking for in these new projects? I don't have data handy on the progress made on working on that immediately, but I do know that it is definitely an issue.
And is there any sense of they've got these 36,000 coming online. They're building more affordable stuff too, which maybe they make their target next year. Is there any sense, big picture, on how this all has affected the question of prices for the market writ large?
The CFO's office, in partnership with Howard University, did try to do some research on this, looking at both the production of housing. Basically, they looked at the production of housing between 2000 and 2018. And around the 2000s is when Anthony Williams had this goal to bring in 100,000 residents. The late 2000s and the first half of the 2010s is when you saw a lot of this population boom. And that is when you start to see housing production pick up. The CFO's office looked at whether there was like an impact on rental pricing. And they found that the greater production of housing and the greater supply there was a marginal but not insignificant impact, keeping rental prices about 5% lower than they otherwise would have been. And they projected similarly for, if the city were to meet this goal to bring in 36,000 new units by 2025, what would we expect to see? They projected similarly about 5% lower prices than they otherwise would have been. The city has also tried to point to, our rental prices grew at a slower rate than the national average, which is interesting. I mean, all this it's very like macroeconomics, kind of like high level, that it's really hard to like pinpoint exactly like the cause and effect. But there is like an agreement, at least among like some housing market researchers, that like that is basic like supply and demand. Like once you start addressing like the shortage issue and just like even out the market a bit, it might cool prices a bit. But this is not something that it's like, okay, we hit the 36,000 mark. Now tomorrow you'll see that rental price start to go down. Like
right.
It's definitely like something that may be a longer term impact that we might not see for some years. It's hard to say.
Paint Care is all about keeping it simple for district residents. They make recycling leftover paint, stain, and varnish easy with convenient drop-off locations like your local paint or hardware store. Each new paint project is an opportunity to reduce waste, and Paint Care has 3 simple rules for painting smarter. 1, buy the right amount of paint for the job. 2, use up leftover paint. And 3, recycle the rest. Visit paintcare.org/3simplerules to get tips on how to buy the right amount of paint, explore ideas for DIY projects for how to use up leftover paint, and look up your nearest drop-off site in the district.
Let's be real, lawsuits are not fun, but with Paulson & Nace, at least they're a little easier. Paulson & Nace is a DC law firm in every sense of the word. It was founded here in 1979. Partner Chris Nace is a local who cares deeply about the DC community, even serving on the board of the local branch of the Living Classrooms Foundation in his free time. Nace and his associates Samantha Peters and Maya Perry handle medical malpractice, wrongful death, and other complex injury cases. And they don't just settle every case. They'll go to court. They'll fight for you. Paulson & Nace has even been recognized as one of U.S. News' best law firms. So if you have been hurt or lost a loved one because of someone else's mistake or negligence, call Paulson & Nace for a no-obligation consultation. Visit www.paulsonandnace.com. That's PAULSONANDNACE.com. Or call 202-463-1999. If you are one of these people I just mentioned who can't afford to live in DC anymore because there's not enough bigger houses for you, you may be spending a lot of time in Union Station. And this week, there was some news about Union Station. It's not stuff you might notice if you're just walking through, but the control of Union Station has shifted from the development company to Amtrak itself. This is sort of the culmination of a long process where Amtrak has sought to get control of the whole building. Up to now, they just controlled the tracks.
I feel like we've been reporting on this lawsuit like the entire time we have existed as CityCast.
It's as if we've been waiting for a train.
Yeah, exactly. The back and forth has been endless. Ugh.
The big picture is like they want to redevelop the thing. It's been, just over my not that short anymore life. It has been derelict. It's been a shopping mall. It's been a less successful shopping mall. It's been a slightly haunted feeling, COVID, everything is closed spot. And Amtrak says they're going to make it much better. The retail side of it, the out in the beautiful part of Union Station, that will take a little longer. But they say right away they're going to get to work on changing the way it is with the gates and stuff, so you don't have to line up in these long lines and whatnot. What do you guys hope happens there?
Yeah, I mean, I would like them to focus. I mean, definitely agree with the initial focus being on getting rid of those lines, because I take Amtrak pretty frequently. My family's up in Jersey and also New York, and so I'm always on the Northeast Corridor. And the whole business of having to queue up for I aim to get to Union Station 30 minutes before my train, just to be able to get in that line early enough to be able to get a decent spot on the train. And then you just stand there endlessly. Especially if the train gets delayed, then you're just standing there for an hour. And that's just such a bad experience. I love that they're focusing on that first. But I would also like for the retail areas and lounge seating areas to be upgraded. Right now, if I do get to Union Station early enough where I have time to chill before having to stand in line, there's nowhere that I actually want to sit. There's nowhere I want to hang out. I end up just walking in circles listening to podcasts, really, which is not the best experience, especially when I have a bag in tow.
Unless you're listening to CityCast, in which case it's a fantastic experience.
Obviously, which is what I do. I just listen to my own voice over and over again. But yeah, it would just be nice to have Union Station be a place that is pleasant to spend time in, which right now it's not.
What I don't get is waiting in that line, right? It's the single worst thing about going to the airport. And you're always nervous and, I'm so far back in the line. What if I don't get to stow my carry-on bag? All that stuff. The point of a train, or one of the upsides of a train, is you're not supposed to walk around with that kind of anxiety. And Union Station is, for most of those Northeast trains, it's the end of the line or the beginning of the line, meaning the trains are just there. So why don't they just let you walk out to the...
Yeah, just go grab a seat.
To the platform. And if it's your train, you get on. If it's not, you wait for your train. The point being, this whole thing of queuing for someone to inspect your paperwork is just inherently for human beings a really anxiety producing thing. And trains, in other countries, trains don't necessarily replicate that. And I don't know why we would do that here, especially when we have a great, it's not like Penn Station, which is really cramped. There is a great big space out there of tracks where you can just go.
I would at some point love to talk to someone who can tell us the history of why Union Station developed that way, because I've never encountered any other train station that operates in such a ridiculous manner. And I'm excited that they're changing that.
I mean, you have, in the sense that it's like Penn Station, where you also have to queue up, and you find out much later when the train is coming. But the point is, Union Station has like a vast rail yard back there. It's not like a tunnel under Manhattan, which is what Penn Station is. So they don't have the excuse.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess with Penn Station, there are like places that I know that I want to grab a bite and other like just options in the station like that. So maybe that also mitigates my frustration with Penn Station compared to Union Station.
Megan, how much time do you spend in Union Station?
I am a Blue Line rider, so I spend almost no time in Union Station.
Maybe this will make it more enticing for you to head out there.
I mean, look at like the stations we're thinking of, which are in like New York or cities that have a much more robust like commuter rail scene, where there's constantly trains going out to suburbs, so that there is like more of an incentive if you own a business, right? Like I'll open a bar here because people want to get a drink before they get on the train. And Union Station, there is MARC trains to Maryland and they're the VRE trains, but there's not that many of them and they don't go at all hours. And that's probably not a critical mass of customers. And people behave differently when they're going to go get on a long distance train. It's a little harder to just wish that into like a European or New York kind of station, which deals with a lot of daily commuters.
Yeah, I mean, I do take the MARC actually pretty often as well because I have a really good friend in Baltimore. But you're right, it's a different behavior because for that, I'm more likely to get there right before the train and just like run onto it. Whereas for the Amtrak, I know I have to queue in line. And yeah, speaking of those delays that I end up encountering, they're hopefully going to be going away, right?
There's Amtrak the thing of Amtrak, like going back to its founding, is the passenger railroads failed. The government took over because it didn't want to see the end of passenger rail traffic in America. But for the most part, Amtrak doesn't own the tracks, which means these freight companies own the tracks, which means Amtrak trains, other than in the Northeast Corridor, often have to just wait while the freight company that owns the tracks gets priority. So they are in litigation about the Crescent, which is the train that goes from here to New Orleans, because the delays are insane, and they believe it's a violation of the contractual rules.
Yeah, I was reading like only 24% of the Amtrak trains on that route actually make it on time, which is crazy. And like it is the southern end of the route, like it is the trains between NOLA and here that end up delayed, but then that's the train that then takes me to New York. And so I do end up waiting at Union Station like 45 minutes for that train to come to me so that I can then get on it to go to New York, which is annoying.
I don't know if I would hold my breath waiting for that, but it would be really cool if Amtrak could be a little bit more on time, huh?
Summer's not over yet. Metropolitan Washington Restaurant Week brings the eats from August 12th through the 18th at hundreds of locations across the DMV, offering amazing 3-course menus for lunch and dinner and brunch. It's a great time to dine out at a favorite eatery or indulge your culinary curiosity and try something new. There's an awesome variety of cuisines to explore and menu options to fit all palates. Many locations are also offering cocktail and wine pairings to further elevate your dining experience. And as a special treat for the summer promotion, you can feed your adventurous side with delicious American lamb dishes at select locations. Just look for the patriotic lamb on listings at rwdmv.com, where you can find the full list of participating restaurants, view menus, and book your reservations. Metropolitan Washington Restaurant Week is presented by RAMW and Events DC.
The land down under has never been easier to reach. United Airlines has more flights between the U.S. and Australia than any other U.S. airline, so you can fly nonstop to destinations like Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. Explore dazzling cities, savor the very best of Aussie cuisine, and get up close and personal with the wildlife. Who doesn't want to hold a koala? Go to united.com/Australia to book your adventure.
One of the big best of lists of DC, of the Washington area, came out this week. It's City Papers. You have been perusing it. What's hot?
Well, let's see. The food and drink editor picks were pretty fun to look at. They picked a best bar to watch a first date. Any thoughts on where you would go to people watch?
Union Station.
Oh my God. If someone asked me out on a first date to Union Station, we would just never meet. That would not happen.
I mean, I definitely watched a great first date at Boundary Stone. I don't know if it's a great place to watch a first date, but I just have definitely done that within the
how
last
could you
6
tell?
months. I don't know. You just know when you know, right? Like you overhear just like a few tidbits of the conversation and you know it's like a get to know you conversation. And there's like this chivalry going on that you just know.
City Paper picked the bar All Souls, which is in Shaw, and they described it as the body language is a little eager yet apprehensive while the two individuals maintain a respectful distance. And then, yeah, you hear like all of the getting to know you talk and tortured attempts at charm, they say.
Is its excellence as a place to watch a first date a function of a lot of people having first dates there? Or is it like something about the acoustics or the sight lines that enable you to like snoop more effectively?
I think a lot of people have first dates at All Souls. It's like close to a lot of other things. So it's a great spot on the way to or from bar hopping. And then I think it's like the right amount of intimate and like open and safe, just the vibe there. But I would have to do a study on the acoustics to be able to tell you if it's like easier to eavesdrop. They also chose best place to order a bartender's choice, like the best bar for that, which it's the first place that comes to mind for me for this, honestly. Do either of you have a place that you think the bartenders are really on point?
I've never, and I should, it's because I'm actually kind of a drink Philistine, but like
Yeah.
I've never actually gone up and said like, hey, bartender, hook me up, make me something good.
Yeah.
And I should start doing that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not that adventurous. I just order a beer. I don't know.
I guess when I'm feeling lazy, a good place to do this, and it's the place that City Paper chose, is Left Door, which is a speakeasy on 14th Street. It's like a few blocks south of U Street. It's a really good spot, and the bartenders there really know their stuff. They also listed best coffee shop food. Cafe Unido in Shaw won that, and the food there is spectacular. I recently had a breakfast burrito there that I was raving to the rest of the CityCast team about. Like I was texting them, like, this burrito is amazing. Have either of you been there?
Mm-hmm.
No, but I plan to.
Okay, you got to check that out. And then from the People and Places editor picks, something that was really surprising to me, they picked a spot for like best place to go dancing on a Friday night that's not a club. I consider myself like fairly in the know about DC's like salsa dancing scene because I really enjoy that. But I'd never heard of this place. It's called Hoya Taqueria, which is in the Generator Hotel on Connecticut Avenue.
That's DuPont Circle.
Yeah, northern DuPont Circle. It might technically be considered Calorama. Apparently, they have like a $5 salsa dancing lesson on Friday nights, and then it switches into like an open dance floor that goes until 1 a.m. And it's like a really nice mix of people, regulars, but also visitors. It feels safe. It's not too crowded, but it's not empty. Honestly, finding a salsa dancing spot like that in the city is like a real unicorn. So I don't know, maybe it'll now be too crowded between City Paper and me talking about it, but I am excited about that. I want to check it out. Yeah, and then there was also another funny one in the People and Places category was Best Rope Swing. City Paper, this is Vince Morris from City Paper straight up advocating that people go swimming in the Potomac, which was shocking to me. He did say like a lot of people say that you shouldn't do it, but many of us who have lived here have done it plenty of times. And he recommends 2 good rope swings. The first one is across from Fletcher's Cove Boathouse. And then the other one, which he says is the superior one, is a little further down the river towards Georgetown. Like you park at Potomac Overlook Park and then walk south on Potomac Heritage Trail, and the rope swing is right there. So yeah, either of you planning to rope swing into the Potomac?
CityCast DC does not take responsibility for anything that may happen.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Maybe.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you. And then, yeah, obviously the most important of the categories was Best Podcast.
And we won, right?
We won runner-up.
Boo!
I'll take second place. That's pretty good. The first place pick was this podcast about the Catherine Fuller murder in 1984, which we also did do one episode on, but they did a whole like true crime mini series on it. So it is an interesting story. I will give it to them. I will take second place. That podcast, if you want to listen to it, is called The Alley, DC's 8th and H case.
All right. Well, Megan, awesome to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks a lot for having me.
And Priyanka, good to see you too, my friend.
Yeah, always. Thank you.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our senior executive producer is Priyanka Tilve. Our senior producer is Julia Karen. Our assistant producer is Ash Durbin. Kayla Cote-Stemmerman writes our fabulous newsletter, Hey DC. Natalia Aldana wrote for us this week as well. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan. If you enjoyed the show, maybe next year vote for us as the best podcast. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.